December 25th, 2014. The sun rises over a world ready to celebrate. In millions of homes, wrapping paper is torn apart, revealing sleek black boxes and controllers. The anticipation is electric. Power buttons are pressed, screens flicker to life, and then, nothing. Silence. A connection error. A spinning wheel that goes nowhere. Across the globe, from New York to London to Tokyo, the digital heartbeat of a generation stops dead. Xbox Live is down. The PlayStation Network is completely dark. It isn't a glitch. It isn't a technical error. It is a hostage situation. As engineers at Microsoft and Sony scramble in blind panic, watching their billion-dollar infrastructures crumble under an invisible weight, a single message flashes across Twitter. It isn't a demand for money. It isn't a political manifesto. It is a taunt, a flag planted in the ashes of the holiday spirit. The perpetrators are not elite spies. They are not a foreign government. They are a loose collective of teenagers, fueled by ego, chaos, and a terrifying amount of power. They call themselves Lizard Squad. But how did a group of kids manage to bring the biggest tech giants to their knees and ruin Christmas for the entire planet? And when the FBI finally comes knocking, will their arrogance be their armor or their undoing? To understand the chaos of that Christmas morning, we have to rewind. We have to leave the corporate boardrooms of Sony and Microsoft and descend into the digital underground. Down here, there are no skyscrapers or stock options. There are only dimly lit bedrooms, glowing monitors, and the ceaseless hum of computer fans. This story doesn't begin with a mastermind planning a heist. It begins in the chaotic, toxic, and lawless corners of the internet relay chat channels, obscure forums, and the dark recesses of Twitter. Here, notoriety is the only currency that matters. And in 2014, a new group was hungry to be the richest men in the room. They called themselves Lizard Squad. The name itself sounds like a bad joke, a cartoonish moniker chosen by teenagers. But the individuals behind the screen were far from harmless. They weren't hackers in the traditional sense of writing complex code to bypass firewalls. They were something far more volatile. They were masters of the DDoS attack, distributed denial of service. It is a brute force tactic, a digital sledgehammer. By hijacking thousands of poorly secured devices, routers, smart cameras, home computers, they built a massive army of zombie machines, a botnet. With a single command, they could direct this army to flood a target with so much traffic that it simply suffocated. For months leading up to December, they were testing their weapons. They treated the internet like a playground where they were the bullies, and everyone else was a victim waiting to be shoved. They started small. They targeted individual streamers on Twitch, knocking them offline just to watch them rage on camera. They disrupted servers for League of Legends and Destiny, laughing as players were disconnected in the middle of matches. They did it for the lulz, a nihilistic pursuit of amusement at the expense of others' misery. But digital vandalism wasn't enough. The adrenaline rush of disconnection was fading. They needed to bleed into the real world. In August 2014, the arrogance of Lizard Squad reached a terrifying new peak. They targeted John Smedley, the president of Sony Online Entertainment, but they didn't just attack his servers. When Smedley was on an American Airlines flight from Dallas to San Diego, the group tweeted a threat to the airline, claiming there were explosives on board his plane. The flight was diverted. Fighter jets were scrambled. Federal agents stormed the tarmac. In that moment, the line was crossed. This was no longer mischief. This was terrorism. They had forced the real world to bend to their digital will, and they got away with it. The lack of immediate consequences fed their God complex. They felt untouchable, invisible, omnipotent. Emboldened by the fear they had caused, they set their sights on the ultimate prize. They wanted a stage so big that the entire world would have to watch. They looked at the calendar and saw the one date where internet traffic and emotional investment collide perfectly: December 25th. It was calculated cruelty. They knew millions of children would be unwrapping consoles. They knew parents would be setting up accounts. They knew the servers would already be strained. It was the perfect storm. While the world shopped for gifts, Lizard Squad shopped for bandwidth. They expanded their botnet, recruiting more zombie devices, sharpening their knives for the main event. They weren't just planning an outage, they were planning an assassination of joy. The attack began precisely as promised. As the clock struck midnight, ushering in Christmas Day, the botnet was unleashed. It was a digital tsunami. Traffic requests hit the login servers of Xbox Live and PlayStation Network, not by the thousands, but by the millions. Inside the network operations centers of Microsoft and Sony, the scene was one of absolute bedlam. Monitors flashed red warnings. Bandwidth graphs didn't just spike, they went vertical, hitting ceilings that shouldn't have been reachable. Engineers attempted to reroute traffic, to scrub the bad data, to block the IPs, but it was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a bucket. The sheer volume of junk data choked the pipes. The doors were slammed shut. The blackout had begun. On Twitter, the reaction was instantaneous. Number PSN down and number Xbox Live down became the top trends worldwide. Confusion turned to anger, and anger turned to despair. Parents were filming their crying children, unable to play their new games, and posting the videos online. For Lizard Squad, this was the applause they had been waiting for. They retweeted the tears, they mocked the complaints, they held the keys to the kingdom, and they were dangling them just out of reach. But then, the story took a turn so bizarre, it could only happen on the internet. As the tech giants flailed, an unlikely savior emerged. Kim Dotcom, the notorious founder of Mega Upload, a man battling his own extradition charges, decided to intervene. He reached out to Lizard Squad publicly. He didn't threaten them. He offered a bribe. He offered them lifetime premium vouchers for his encrypted file hosting service, Mega, a privacy haven for their data. It was a deal with the devil, negotiated in plain sight on Twitter, and incredibly, it worked. The squad accepted the vouchers. They tweeted, "Thanks at Kim Dotcom." And just like that, the attack stopped. The servers slowly flickered back to life. It was a humiliating moment for law enforcement. The FBI, with its billions in funding, had been powerless. A fugitive tech mogul had solved the crisis with a handful of download codes. But while the attack stopped, the investigation was only just beginning. The squad had made a fatal mistake. In their thirst for fame, they had stepped into the light. They began giving interviews. They spoke to the BBC. They spoke to Sky News. One member, calling himself Member 2, appeared on camera. His face was obscured, his voice distorted, but his ego was crystal clear. He bragged about the chaos. He claimed they did it to expose security flaws, a classic hacker excuse that convinced no one. "We have massive capability," he boasted. He felt safe. He believed his VPNs and proxies made him a ghost. He was wrong. While the FBI moved through the bureaucratic red tape of international warrants, independent security researchers were moving faster. Brian Krebs, a journalist and cybersecurity expert who had been a victim of Lizard Squad himself, was digging. And in the world of cybercrime, the loudest voices are often the sloppiest. The squad had launched a service called Lizard Stressor, a tool allowing anyone to rent their botnet to launch attacks for a fee. It was a way to monetize their fame, but to take payments, they had to leave trails. To manage the botnet, they had to log in, and in the code of their website, they had left breadcrumbs. Researchers discovered unmasked IP addresses. They found logs of chat conversations where the members slipped up, using real names or referring to local events. The mask of the international hacking syndicate began to crumble. They weren't ghosts, they were boys. In the United Kingdom, authorities zeroed in on a 22-year-old named Vinny Omari. He had been reckless, leaving digital fingerprints all over the PayPal accounts used to fund the group's servers. In Finland, the trail led to a teenager named Julius Kivimaki, known online as Z-Kill. Kivimaki was particularly vicious. a young sociopath who had swatted American police departments and terrorized parents, yet he lived comfortably in his parents' home, surrounded by high-end electronics. The net was tightening. The FBI coordinated with the UK's National Crime Agency and Finnish police. They didn't strike immediately. They waited. They watched. They captured terabytes of data, chat logs, payment receipts, admission of guilt. They needed to prove not just that these boys were associated with the group, but that they were the ones pressing the button on Christmas Day. The squad continued to tweet, oblivious to the crosshairs painted on their backs. They thought the silence from law enforcement was incompetence. In reality, it was the deep breath before the plunge. The investigators had mapped the network. They knew who sat behind the keyboards. They knew where they lived. They knew what they ate for breakfast. The game was over. The players just didn't know it yet. The invincibility of Lizard Squad evaporated not with a bang, but with a knock on the door. In the United Kingdom, the sanctuary of Vinnie Omari was breached. Officers from the Thames Valley Police didn't need to hack a firewall. They simply raided his home. They hauled away phones, laptops, and Xboxes, the tools of his trade, now reduced to evidence bags labeled with black marker. The untouchable hacker was just a 22-year-old man, blinking in the sudden exposure of the real world. But the true center of the storm was in Finland. The trail led to the doorstep of Julius Kivimaki, the teenager known as Zekil. He was the loudmouth, the one who had taunted the FBI on television, the one who had terrorized families with swatting calls. When the Finnish police moved in, they didn't find a criminal mastermind in a high-tech lair. They found a 17-year-old boy. The legal proceedings that followed were a collision between two worlds: the archaic, slow-moving justice system and the lightning-fast, borderless reality of cybercrime. Kivimaki's trial in Espoo District Court was a spectacle of numbers. The prosecution laid out a staggering list of offenses. They weren't just charging him for the Christmas Day attacks. They charged him with data breaches, felony payment fraud, harassment, and corporate sabotage. In total, the charges racked up to over 50,000 instances of computer crime. 50,000. The courtroom was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaotic noise of Twitter. The prosecutors painted a picture of a remorseless digital vandal, someone who enjoyed the suffering of others. They argued that age should not be a shield for crimes of this magnitude. They detailed how he had cost companies millions, how he had wasted countless hours of police time, and how he had invaded the sanctity of people's homes with his swatting pranks. The defense, predictable and desperate, leaned on his youth. They argued he was a minor during most of the crimes. They painted him as a misguided teen caught up in the thrill of the internet, unaware of the gravity of his actions. They played to the judge's lack of technical understanding. To a generation of older jurists, a DDoS attack was an abstract concept, a nuisance rather than an act of terror. The world watched, waiting for the hammer to drop. Gamers, tech executives, and law enforcement agencies expected an example to be made. They expected prison time. They expected justice. Then came the verdict. The judge looked at the 50,000 crimes. He looked at the chaos caused on a global scale, and he handed down a 2-year suspended sentence. No prison, no jail cell. Kivimaki was ordered to forfeit about 6,000 euros obtained through crime and surrender his computer. That was it. He walked out of the courthouse, a free man. The internet erupted. It was a second explosion of rage, rivaling the Christmas blackout itself. It felt like a glitch in the justice system. Zekil had held the world hostage, cost corporations millions, and his punishment was essentially being grounded and losing his allowance. It was a slap on the wrist, so light it felt like a handshake. However, the story didn't end in Finland. The United States Department of Justice was watching, and they were not as forgiving. They were playing the long game. While Kivimaki smirked at his suspended sentence, the FBI continued to pull threads. They zeroed in on another member, Zachary Bukta, operating out of Maryland. In 2016, the federal hammer finally swung. Bukta wasn't treated as a misguided kid. He was charged with conspiracy to commit damage to protected computers. The American courts offered a starkly different setting. There was no leniency here. Facing the crushing weight of federal prison, Botnet pled guilty. He was ordered to pay $350,000 in restitution to 2 gambling companies he had victimized. He was sentenced to 3 months in prison, a light sentence by American standards, but a sentence nonetheless. But the disparity remained. The primary architects of the Christmas attacks, the faces of Lizard Squad, had largely evaded the cage. They had exposed a terrifying truth. The law was too slow, too old, and too confused to catch up with a crime that moves at the speed of light. The verdict wasn't just a legal ruling. It was a message to every aspiring hacker watching from the shadows. You can burn the world down, and if you're young enough, you might just get away with it. Lizard Squad eventually dissolved, their members scattering like cockroaches when the lights turn on. The name faded from the headlines, replaced by newer, louder threats. But the scars they left on the internet did not heal. They festered. The true legacy of that Christmas blackout wasn't the downtime, it was the blueprint. In a final act of chaotic generosity, the source code for Lizard Stressor, the weapon used to crush Sony and Microsoft, was leaked to the public. It was Pandora's box thrown wide open. Suddenly, the ability to cripple a multinational corporation wasn't reserved for elite hackers. It was available to anyone with a grudge and a few dollars in Bitcoin. This ushered in the era of the IoT botnet. The code revealed a terrifying truth. Our smart toasters, our webcams, our digital thermostats were all soldiers waiting to be conscripted. The massive Mirai Botnet attacks that would follow years later, shutting down huge swaths of the American internet, walked on the path that Lizard Squad had paved. For Sony and Microsoft, the age of innocence was over. They were forced to fortify their castles, spending billions on infrastructure not to improve games, but to build higher walls. The cost of online gaming rose. Security checks became more intrusive, and the freedom of the open network was suffocated by the necessity of defense. As for the members, some vanished into the mundane reality of adulthood. Others, addicted to the rush, spiraled deeper into cybercrime, trading game servers for credit card theft and ransomware, eventually finding themselves in cells far less forgiving than the ones in Finland. But the most haunting realization is not about technology. It is about power. 7 teenagers, armed with nothing but arrogance and leased code, managed to hold the happiness of the world hostage. They proved that our digital lives, our connections, our finances, our entertainment are built on glass. We live in a house of cards, and we are constantly surrounded by children holding matches. As you stare at your screen tonight, secure in your connection, ask yourself, is the network actually safe? Or are we just waiting for the next generation of bored kids to decide that it's time to turn the lights off again?